Imagine opening your morning newspaper, right? It's May 1990.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and you flip over to the culture section, and there you see the absolute godfather of Western thought, Socrates, just casually dismissed as a 10th-rate philosopher.
I mean, that is just a wild thing to see in print.
Totally wild. A writer named Madani Saleh actually published this critique in Al-Qadisiyah newspaper. He basically argued that Socrates offered very little of value to human civilization.
He even suggested he was less important than the local poets of his time, right?
Exactly. And, welcome to today's deep dive, because that specific insult is our launching pad today.
It's the ultimate intellectual provocation.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to explore this incredible response to that article. We are diving into a section called Defense of Socrates, which specifically covers chapters 2 and 3 of the book Philosophical Essays by philosopher Abdul Jabbar Al-Waily.
Right, because Al-Waily, he just couldn't let that slide. He felt completely compelled to set the record straight.
And he doesn't just, list off Socrates' achievements. He firmly places him in this ultimate philosophical triad alongside Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah, he goes way deeper than a standard biography.
Yeah.
He shows how Socrates literally rescued the whole concept of absolute truth.
Saved it from a group of thinkers who were basically trying to prove that reality is entirely subjective.
Right, the Sophists. To really get the magnitude of Al-Waily's defense, we have to talk about these guys. They were the intellectual villains of Socrates' era.
They were kind of the dominant cultural force back then, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
they championed this deeply dangerous argument. Their core premise was that human senses like sight, touch, hearing are the only tools we have for acquiring knowledge.
Which, honestly, if you don't think about it too hard, sounds pretty logical. I mean, we rely on our senses all day, every day.
Right, it sounds totally pragmatic, but that's the trap. The Sophists correctly pointed out that our senses are incredibly unreliable.
Like how a breeze might feel freezing to me, but refreshing to you?
Exactly. Or how a mountain looks like a tiny pebble from miles away, but it's massive when you're standing right next to it.
So, because our senses are always changing and totally subjective...
The Sophists concluded that absolute truth just does not exist.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sophist idea sounds exactly like the darkest corners of modern internet debates, where everyone just shouts, well, that's my truth.
It's the exact same energy.
Reading through Al-Waily's breakdown, it feels like a philosophical blank check. Like, if there's no objective truth, then words like good and evil just completely dissolve.
That is the perilous endpoint of their whole ideology. If everything is relative, any action is justifiable as long as the person doing it claims it fits their personal reality.
Fair. Society has zero moral anchor at that point.
None. And this is the exact crisis Socrates stepped into. Al-Waily meticulously details how Socrates defeated this logic.
How do you even fight back against an argument that claims nothing is real?
Well, he realized that fighting the Sophists on the battlefield of sensory experience was a losing game. The senses actually are flawed.
So he just abandoned that battlefield completely.
He engineered a massive pivot. He moved the search for truth out of the physical senses and directly into the human intellect.
Oh, wow. He recognized the eyes and ears are just like data collectors, but the mind is the actual processor.
Yes, and Al-Waily uses this brilliant illustration in the text. He points out that when you walk outside, your eyes might see a specific man, or a specific pen, or a tree.
So your senses just capture the isolated object in that one exact moment?
Exactly, with all its specific physical flaws.
Yeah.
But Socrates argued that the intellect does something the senses can't do, an extraordinary feat of abstraction.
So like if I look at an oak tree with a broken branch...
Your mind doesn't just register that one broken object. It instantly connects it to a universal abstract concept of treeness.
Or like how you grasp the universal idea of humanity, no matter who is standing in front of you.
Right, so while our sensory data is constantly shifting, just like the Sophists claimed, our intellect operates on this higher shared level.
That is brilliant. Because we all possess this innate capacity to recognize universal categories, we actually share an objective reality.
We aren't isolated in our own subjective bubbles. And that is exactly how Socrates saves truth. He establishes that the human intellect, not subjective physical sensation, is the real measure of ethics.
So we can use logic to universally define things like justice and virtue and truth.
That's precisely.
Wait, so this brings up a really interesting point about his most famous student. Because when we talk about universal concepts in the mind, we usually credit Plato, right, with the world of ideals.
The theory of forms, yeah.
Right, but Al-Waily makes it clear that Plato didn't just invent that out of thin air. He built his entire metaphysical house on Socrates' foundation.
It's a crucial distinction. Plato definitely expanded it. He theorized that these universal concepts, like the perfect idea of justice, actually exist independently in this perfect world of ideals.
And our physical world just has, like, imperfect temporary copies of them. Did Plato essentially steal his master's thunder?
Well, Al-Waily emphasizes that Plato wasn't stealing at all. Plato actually honored his teacher.
Oh, by making Socrates the main character and voice in the Republic, right?
Exactly. Socrates poured the concrete foundation of universal intellect, and Plato just built the towering structure on top of it.
Okay, so Socrates establishes that objective truth exists, and then he connects it to practical life with this formula. Knowledge leads to virtue, and virtue leads to happiness.
Which is very elegant in theory. Finding truth naturally makes you act virtuously, which gives you a fulfilling life.
But the practical application gets a little messy, doesn't it?
Historically, yes, because Socrates never wrote down a strict step-by-step manual for what happiness looks like daily.
So his followers just took that formula and ran in wildly different directions.
Completely opposite directions. Al-Waily outlines a few of these spin-off movements. First, you have the Epicureans.
Right. They looked at the formula and decided happiness is basically found in pleasure, both physical and moral.
But then, in stark contrast, you have the Cynics. They believed the pursuit of virtue meant absolute simplicity, extreme asceticism.
This is where it gets really interesting. Because to them, virtue meant rejecting all artificial societal norms. And that leads us to Diogenes.
Oh, Diogenes. He's the most prominent cynic, and Al-Waily tells this unforgettable story about him. He lived in a large ceramic jar, basically a barrel on the streets of Athens.
This is totally off the grid. The ultimate ancient anti-influencer.
Truly. And one day, Diogenes sees a dog drinking water straight from a river with its mouth.
And what does he do? He just throws away his own wooden drinking bowl.
Because he realized he didn't need it. Even a simple bowl was an unnecessary luxury standing between him and pure virtue.
That is so extreme.
His commitment was absolute. There's another story where Alexander the Great, the most powerful conqueror on earth, stands over Diogenes.
So Alexander offers to give him literally anything he wants, right?
Any favor. And Diogenes just looks at him and asks him to step out of his sunlight.
He just completely dismisses the most powerful guy in the world because power holds zero value in his reality.
Exactly. Now, alongside the Epicureans and the Cynics, Al-Waily also introduces the Stoics, who took a third path.
The indifference route.
Right. They believed happiness was internal equilibrium. If you actively expect evil and hardship, its impact is lessened. Your lack of care brings peace.
Okay, so his followers lived these incredibly extreme lives. But how does this connect back to Socrates himself?
Well, this brings us back to that newspaper article. Madani Slay, calling him a 10th-rate philosopher, implies he was just a guy talking all talk, no action.
Like a hypocrite or some arrogant dictator imposing his thoughts.
But Al-Waily uses Socrates' actual biography to completely dismantle that. Socrates was the ultimate embodiment of his own philosophy.
Starting with his humility, right? Despite being called the wisest man in Athens, he famously said, "I only know that I understand nothing."
Which is such a profound baseline. Al-Waily gives this perfect example. The philosopher Heraclitus once gave Socrates a really dense, complex book to read.
And when Heraclitus asked for his thoughts,
Socrates just said that the parts he understood were excellent. So he assumed the parts he didn't understand were equally excellent.
wow, giving the author that much grace instead of just attacking what he didn't get?
He defaulted to recognizing his own limits. But alongside that humility, he had this almost terrifying capacity for focus.
Like the meditation story, where he just stood in one spot, meditating all night.
Completely paralyzed in an intellectual trance until the morning sun physically woke him up.
Which, sounds very profound until you realize he had a family.
Oh, it caused significant friction at home. His wife was constantly exasperated by him prioritizing thoughts over, well, practical reality.
Al-Waily includes that famous story where she gets so annoyed she just dumps a bucket of water right on his head.
And Socrates, completely unbothered, calmly wipes his face and says, "After the thunder comes the rain."
I mean, that's just hilarious. But it also proves he actually had that internal equilibrium. He was practically a Stoic before the Stoics existed.
He had absolute public integrity, too. Once, a playwright mocked him on stage with this exaggerated comedic caricature.
And Socrates was in the audience for that, right?
He was, and he actually stood up in the theater, barefoot, bareheaded, in his ragged cloak, just so the crowd could look at the fake representation and compare it to the real man.
Unshaken. But that physical courage eventually leads to the trial, because his insistence on absolute truth really threatened the political power in Athens.
It led to his unjust imprisonment and, ultimately, a death sentence by hemlock poisoning. Al-Waily points to his final days as the absolute proof he wasn't 10th rate.
Because he literally chose death over a simple apology. Was he just being stubborn? Or was there a deeper philosophical point?
He was entirely philosophical. He had multiple chances to save himself, his wealthy friends, bribe the guards, and had an escape route ready.
But he refused to leave his cell.
Because he believed in the rule of law as a universal truth. He said escaping would mean abandoning logic for the law of the jungle.
It would have basically unraveled his entire life's work.
Exactly. He even refused the authorities' offer to just apologize for a lighter sentence. He said he should be the one judging his accusers.
And then he drinks the poison.
Drank the hemlock like it was fresh water. As his friends wept, he actually scolded them. He said he had sent the women away specifically to avoid all this absurd crying.
And his final words to his friend Crito are just staggering. I owe a rooster to Asclepius, do not neglect it.
Right, Asclepius being the god of healing.
So he's saying death is actually a cure from the sickness of mortal life. Just incredible.
But his death wasn't the end. The final chapters of Al-Waily's text track how Socrates' ideas rippled through history, clashing with new forms of sophistry.
Wait, we're jumping from ancient Greece to modern philosophy now, right? Because Al-Waily brings up Immanuel Kant.
Yes, Kant echoed Socrates with his belief in innate, absolute ethics. But then Al-Waily contrasts that with William James and American pragmatism.
Okay, this part is fascinating because James basically argued that truth is just whatever works practically. Like, if a tool works as a lighter, it is a lighter.
Right, he applied that to beliefs. If a belief in God is practically useful for you, then it is functionally true for you.
But hold on, if truth is just whatever is practically useful, isn't that exactly the slippery slope Socrates drank poison to fight against? It feels like the Sophists just rebranded.
That is exactly what Al-Waily argues. He views pragmatism as a modern evolution of sophistry. If truth is just a metric of personal convenience, the objective bedrock is gone.
And Al-Waily doesn't just stick to philosophy either. He traces this ancient Greek thought straight into modern physics.
Yes, highlighting the sheer depth of their intellect. He brings up the ancient debate over reality itself. On one side, Heraclitus argued for dialectics, that everything is constantly changing.
So a book is simultaneously existent and non-existent because its state is always in flux.
Exactly. But on the other side, Democritus proposed atomism, arguing that matter is made of indestructible static blocks.
And then Zeno chimes in and critiques the whole idea of dividing things.
Right. And humanity was stuck on this debate for millennia, until Albert Einstein finally resolved it by unifying mass and energy.
By proving EMC2, showing that static atoms are actually dense, transformable energy.
Showing that the ancient Greeks were intuiting the fundamental mechanics of the universe through pure logic, long before modern instruments existed.
It totally validates Socrates' faith in the human mind. But Al-Waily takes it one step further with a really fascinating religious speculation.
Yes, and we're presenting this exactly as Al-Waily wrote it. He references Surah Ghafir, verse 78 of the Quran, which mentions unnamed prophets sent throughout history.
And he speculates whether Socrates might actually be one of them.
He draws these really compelling parallels. Socrates was killed for his unwavering belief in one ultimate truth in a society that was aggressively polytheistic.
And he dedicated his life to preaching absolute ethics.
Exactly. So viewing him not just as a philosopher, but potentially as a divine messenger, completely recontextualizes his famous phrase, know thyself.
Socrates used know thyself to focus people on this life, right? To use logic to find truth here.
Yes, but Al-Waily shows how later Islamic thinkers expanded that idea. Imam Ali expanded it massively, saying, God bless the one who knows from where, in where, and to where.
Oh, elevating it from just knowing your personality to understanding your divine origin and destination.
And he includes Prophet Muhammad's profound statement, knowing God requires knowing oneself. Al-Waily notes that while Socrates relied purely on intellect to fight the Sophists' relativity, Islam solved that dizzying relativity by providing divine revelation and consensus.
It gives humanity an unbreakable anchor.
It really does. Al-Waily's defense is just a masterful journey. He starts with a modern newspaper insult and takes us down to the absolute bedrock of universal truth.
Socrates wasn't just some guy talking in the square. He was the ultimate defender of the mind's ability to grasp reality against a world trying to reduce everything to subjective illusions.
He secured the foundation of logic.
Which means every time you use logic to find a universal truth, rather than just reacting to your immediate feelings, you owe a debt to Socrates.
The man in the ragged cloak.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
Al-Waily showed us how Socrates championed know thyself and how later thinkers expanded on it. But look at our world today.
It's pretty noisy.
Right. Endless data, social media, a constant craving for external validation. It feels a lot like the Sophists' subjective world. So if Socrates were standing in your room right now, would he say you were actually spending time getting to know your true self? Or are you just getting to know the version of yourself you present to the world?
Oof, that is a heavy question.
Something to think about. Until next time, keep digging deeper.